1 week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes. It has been too damn long, but we are back in these streets. And moving forward, you can expect these shows every Friday. And I'll do some makeup ones for those that we missed. Apologies for my absence. We packed up, sold the house, moved across country. Now, as you can see, I'm in a different location. Well, just see a white wall. This will change. Hopefully, I'll get this set up here rather quickly. We are now in North Carolina. So without further ado, dude, we're gonna We're gonna jump right into it. I got Papy with me. You all know Papy. Last we talked, dude, was like at the beginning of the draft cycle. But tell me a little bit about what you've been doing since the last time we jammed.
Yeah, I mean, drafting basically, is all I do these days. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you that's all I do. All I do is draft. She had to, state a no drafting at the dinner table rule, and I don't listen to it. I break it all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, she, will tell you I draft all the time. And it's true. I'm going to be maxing out the Eliminator this year. I'm going to be maxing out Weekly Winners this year, along with, BBM and DraftKings contests. So, and really, I've been at it since the big board, maxed that out. So this is definitely actually my biggest, best ball year overall, pretty much maxing all the main contests. So, you draft, you eat, you sleep, you do the essentials. I think you're muted.
I am sorry. I was trying to pull up some other things. Yeah, you talked about the essentials, dude. The essentials are drafting. We're like 100% in the thick of draft season right now. And this is I think this is, in my opinion, the funnest time to draft. Because we don't have all the information. We don't have like camp stuff. We have like random sporadic beat reports coming out. But other than that, it's like kind of the Wild West. How are you kind of handling that whole layout with like, we don't really have a lot of information right now?
Yeah, so I agree. This is a good time to draft. You have a couple signings that happen, but not much changes usually throughout June. And so I'm trying to be at 50 of each. I'm going taking the family to Disneyland. Actually, we're leaving this weekend, so I'm trying to be at 50.
Right on.
Yeah. So I'm trying to be at 50. In each contest is kind of how I've managed my like timing of drafts. So, getting early ones in, certainly you need to if you're going to try to, max everything out just from a time perspective, but then saving, more for the later months because you do have more information. But I have some teams that have some picks where I'm kind of like already, I don't know about that guy. But then other teams that, where you have an early George Pickens before you got, traded team and you're getting like, 25 spots of ADP value. So, there's pluses and minuses to drafting early, but I kind of do it throughout the whole draft season.
Yeah, dude. We just got back from during our move. We took 15 days on our move coming from Arizona to North Carolina. And part of that was we stopped at Disney World.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, dude. So that was it was a good time, man. Our family's big Disney fan. Anyway, you talked about like the lack of information, how it's like, in my opinion, like we should be drafting throughout the entirety of the draft cycle, like from when the contest opens to when, like the day before the NFL season starts, because we have this, and I've talked about it in the past, we have this like time versus information equation that happens throughout that entire time frame. And I feel like a lot of the field is drafting statically from, drafting the same way from the start of these contests, the opening of these contests to the start of the NFL season. And I think that is a mistake that we can look to leverage. And that's especially true for some of these contests that are newer on Underdog or haven't been out for very long, specifically the Weekly Winners and the Eliminator. And the Eliminator has been out for 3 years now, but they did a drastic format change going into this season where we used to be thrown into pods that ranged from like 6-person pods to like 14-person pods. And now it's like mano-a-mano after week 1 in the Eliminator. And that's a huge change. I have my thoughts. I wouldn't have done that. I don't like the format change, but that's something that we have to kind of talk about. We have to take into account. So I want to spend the rest of our time together today talking about Weekly Winners, talking about the Eliminator. And one of why I want to do that is, like, you mentioned something that kind of sparked not interest, but like rekindled kind of my love for those contests, because I feel like there is a massive edge to be had in both of those contests. So talk to me a little bit about what you've seen, and you said you plan on maxing those 2 contests. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna max those 2. Like I said, I want to be at 50 in each of those here. Hopefully, by the end of the day here. So I'm almost there. And it's interesting because in Best Ball Mania, it's table stakes at this point that like roster construction is pretty similar. Like everyone within the same range. I think 2-5-8-3 was like the meta for a while, and then I think this year, 3 quarterbacks has done well the last 2 years. So I think those are sort of taking over. I think 3-6-7-2 I've seen is, I guess, the new 2-5-8-3, so to speak. But any roster construction really within certain parameters of 2 to 3 quarterbacks, 2 to 3 tight ends, and then 5 to 6 running backs, and 7 to 8 wide receivers is generally going to be considered optimal. And everyone sort of drafts that way and knows that. But when you get into weekly winners, especially, roster construction is all over the map. There is not a consensus. It seems like you'll see rosters that are 1-8-8-1s, and then you'll see rosters that are like, have 4 QBs or 4 tight ends. So really it's, there's certainly not a form to it the same way that there is with Best Ball Mania. And then there's other people that you see in weekly winners who are drafting very obviously just the exact same way they would draft in like Best Ball Mania. There's no, it's clear that they're just doing the exact same thing. So, I think that the interesting part about that is like someone's right and someone's wrong. Like if someone's drafting a 1-8-8-1 and then, somebody else is drafting a team with 4 QBs or 4 tight ends, one of them is right and one of them is wrong, because those 2 things are really so far apart that they can't really both be optimal. So, I texted you about that. I said, like, what are your thoughts? And because I've seen this huge discrepancy in lineups. And for me personally, I feel like 1 QB constructions, especially if you have an elite QB, or 2 QB constructions if maybe you don't have an elite QB, is the way to go. I think that because we're playing for one week, so it doesn't matter if you get last. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter how bad your team is any other week than its best week. And so if you have a QB, right, he's going to have a big week. And you know that in a week where you're going to have a chance to win. So why would you want to waste roster spots in that week on another 2, 3, 4 QBs where those could be extra running backs, tight ends, receivers that could potentially have, a top end week? That's what makes sense to me from a roster construction standpoint. I haven't built any weekly winners teams that have more than 2 QBs, and I've built a lot of them that have 1. And I'll even do 1 QB team sometimes, like if I have a, because obviously stacking is, important, but even if I have a weaker QB sometimes, I'll stack his whole offense and just be like, whatever, I'll just roll with him. And like, if that offense has a big week, then, I'm trying to win that week. So I don't know. That's how I see it, but I don't know. What do you think? With me? Hopefully he comes back. It's the move to a different setup.
Yo, dude, you got me?
Yeah, you back?
I don't know what the hell happened. Have to figure out the internet going on with this.
You're moving, man.
All right, dude. So the last thing you talked about was how you've seen a ton of different approaches with this contest, specifically speaking to weekly winners. So we need to realize that like we don't have the data in either of these contests to kind of reverse engineer what is optimal yet. We have 3 data points for the Eliminator, and we have 2 data points for weekly winners, right? That's it. That's all we have. So both of these contests are very much in the theory realm. We have to understand that right now, and it becomes harder to like reverse engineer what is optimal. So let's look at weekly winners solely, and then we'll talk about the Eliminator after that. That work for you?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So with weekly winners, what is this contest? We're drafting a best ball team with similar roster spots, and we use that same team 17 times in a row, effectively for a best ball DFS contest. It's just for one. We're only worried about winning, and we're only worried about winning one time. We do it with the same team 17 times over. So if that's the case, what wins? Well, we do have some data for DFS. And so what wins in DFS? You are 90% likelier to win a DFS week if you have the overall top scoring quarterback. So let's just start there. If you have, like, what does it mean to have the overall top scoring quarterback? Well, 80% of the time over the last 3 seasons, the top scoring quarterback has been one of the top 5 guys per ADP in 2025. So we're talking about, it's just the 5 names, like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. Who else is in the top 5 this year?
Josh Allen. Did you say Josh Allen?
Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Hurts, and who the hell else?
Who are we forgetting?
Jaden Daniels. There we go. So if 80% of the time the top overall scoring quarterback is one of those 5 names, and that's over a 3-year sample, and that's comparing like the best ball ADP going into the season versus the production in that season. So like we're not just saying like it was one of those 5 guys over the last 3 years. We're just saying over the last 3 years, one of the top 5 quarterbacks per ADP is the top overall scorer on a given week. Okay. So if we are 90% likelier to win a DFS week when we have the top scoring quarterback, and we know that 80% of the time it's one of those 5 names, that's like the starting point for me. Like we must have one of the top scoring quarterbacks on a given week to have a chance to win that given week. So I'm almost like, and the current ADP for weekly winners is accounting for that. Those top 5 quarterbacks are pushed up. To me, they're not pushed up enough, and I'm not leaving a draft without one of those guys. Now the question becomes like, what are we doing behind that? And you talked about like, hey, majority of my rosters in this contest are 1 quarterback rosters. I would agree, because we're not playing for more chances. Like, let's back up. If we have multiple quarterbacks, that's immediately taking away from, and we know that quarterbacks are pushed up, that's immediately taking away from the spike week potential of the elites at the other positions, right? So to me, I want 1 quarterback. It must be one of the top 5 guys. And now I'm building effectively what looks like a DFS roster to maximize my chances of winning whenever my quarterback is the top overall scorer. That might only happen once, twice. Maybe there's been 3 instances over the last 3 years where a quarterback has done it 3 times in a given season. So what does that mean to us? Like, I want a top 5 quarterback, and I'm probably not drafting another one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you brought the stats there to back it up. Thank you. I certainly hadn't looked into that, but know that most of the time the top overall scoring quarterback is going to be an elite guy, and you do see the ADP account for that, right? Like I think Lamar Jackson goes around like 17 or 18 in the Eliminator League or in Weekly Winners, which is higher than his ADP and other stuff, because we know like, hey, he's going to have some 40-point weeks, and I'm going to be alive to win the Weekly Winner that week. So yeah, I always want an elite QB, and actually in Underdog, generally speaking, really in all of the contests, I like elite QBs. And the reason for that being that it's a higher percentage of your scoring, in half point PPR with no bonuses compared to like DK, say, your quarterback just accounts for a higher percentage of your overall team's points. So, when these elite guys have their big days and they score, 30 to 40 points on Underdog, it's like you need that, right? Like we were comparing it to DFS and all the stats you were saying for DFS, and I don't know exactly what site those are coming from, but I'm sure DK is involved. It's one of the biggest DFS sites. It's not only DK, and even in that format with bonuses and full point PPR, you still need like the top scoring quarterback most of the time, right? So now imagine that same thing, but it's half point PPR and there's no bonuses. And so the quarterback is accounting for even a higher percentage of the total team scoring. Those stats that you just listed might even be more skewed in the favor of you need the top quarterback. So I think getting a top quarterback in weekly winners, other than that, I'm going to max it out. And so I want to have a little variety. Like if I was only doing, a handful of teams, I would basically overdraft the elite quarterbacks if I had to, just to make sure that I get one. And then I would just do one quarterback, stack them as much as I could and roll with that, I think would be my strategy.
Yeah, so I pulled up this is the ADP for the Weekly Winners contest, and we're looking at about a 25% to a 33% increase in ADP for the top 5 guys. So Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, these are all third rounders. And then Jaden Daniels, 3-4 turn type quarterbacks in the season long contest on Underdog. And we look down to Joe Burrow. He's around an ADP of 62 right now in regular contests, and he's up at 42.
Something real quick about Joe Burrow that's hilarious, because I think this is the funniest thing. As you said, he's about 20 spots lower in other contests, but you should only obviously be taking Joe Burrow if you're stacking him in weekly winners, right? Like it's insane. He's not going to score with his legs. So like you would only want Burrow if you're stacking him. And if you see Chase still goes first and Higgins is still right around his similar ADP. So it's like almost harder to stack Burrow in weekly winners because so many people take him earlier, but they don't have Higgins or Chase often. So that's another thing I see all the time, and I just like blows my mind because I'm just like, what are you doing taking an unstacked Joe Burrow?
Like in DFS, are we ever playing Joe Burrow without? Like, are we ever playing Joe Burrow naked? No.
Never.
So we're never drafting him naked in this format.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, I like that shout. What about some of these other top guys? I know I'm very rarely looking to go naked on any quarterback in DFS. Very, very rarely. There are some interesting DFS aspects that we could talk about in a little bit about quarterback, but what about some of these other guys, the top guys that do have the leg chops?
Yeah, so it's actually sort of interesting because, especially Lamar and Allen, they don't really have a okay, here's their alpha number one. I think between the two teams, like Zay Flowers is probably the guy going the highest of any of their stacking partners. So, that's sort of an interesting setup because oftentimes you're going to have the top QB and his top weapon, both be highly touted fantasy assets. And we don't have that here. So it's interesting. I still want to stack them to the hilt. Like, I just think I want to stack as much as I can in this format. I don't care if they're running quarterbacks. I think the one team that I sent you when we were talking the other day, was a Lamar Jackson solo quarterback team, but I had almost all of the Ravens, stacked with him. And that's still what I'm going to try to do, even with the guys who run, because I just think in a single week format, why not have them stacked as much as possible? I mean, sure, like they might have big games where they don't bring their receivers with them, but you also don't have to use super high picks on their receivers. So you may still have other guys that, go off that week. And if they do have a big game where they bring one of them with them, well, if you have them all, like I think on the team that I sent to you, I think I have everybody except maybe Hopkins on the Ravens on that team. I think I even have Keaton Mitchell or
Bateman.
I have like everybody except Hopkins, I think, as his pass catchers. I took Likely and also Andrews. Like I'll do that. You know what I mean? Like if I'm going to take Jackson, I'll take Likely and Andrews. I'll take them both. And so you're basically saying, all right, well, if he has a 40-point game, like it's probably like one guy has a good game at least, and I want to have that guy. So that's how I'm going to set it up. And then all the weeks when the Ravens offense just doesn't have a good game, like who cares? Like you get last, but so what? So that's what makes sense to me. Like I think even with the running people, you just stack up as much as you can in weekly winners.
I'm with you there. Also, there's really two names I would single out as guys likelier than the rest of the bunch to put up like the overall QB1 score on a given week this coming season. The first is Justin Fields. The second is Anthony Richardson. And it's very interesting. Like there's less uncertainty with Justin Fields, but there's like all the uncertainty with Anthony Richardson. Are you attacking those guys at all when you do not or are not able for whatever reason to land one of these top 5 guys? And how are you handling their situations?
Yeah, glad you bring those two guys up, man, because they're both interesting. And I love one, and I really dislike the other. And I love Justin Fields, and I'm not a Justin Fields like is good at football truther. Like I don't think he's super great at real football, but fantasy football, he's good, because so much of his production comes with his legs, and he is sort of a guy who just is willing to be a gunslinger when he needs to be. So he's just a much better fantasy player than he is a real life quarterback. And I think he's actually so much better of a fantasy player than he is a real life quarterback that it's hard for us to even rank him like where he should be ranked. Like in my mind, he should probably be up around like Mahomes and Mayfield in terms of where he's being drafted, like right below the top guys. He's not quite there, but right in that next tier. And if anyone was going to finish, if any QB, if you were like, okay, you have to pick a QB, outside the top 100 picks or whatever that could finish as the QB overall 1 or QB top 3 or whatever, that top tier, I'd pick Fields. He has that upside to just have a lot of rushing touchdowns and like get there that way. So I really like Fields. You can draft him naked if you want. Obviously, Garrett Wilson is fine. I take him with his tight end sometimes, Mason Taylor. So I do like Fields. Richardson is the opposite. I can't get there. I try, I wanted to like him. I liked him, and I wanted to be saying everything I just said about Fields. Like I want to apply it to him, but he's actually not good enough at real life football to like stay on the field. And he also might just be made of glass. I mean, a lot of injuries for a guy who is like a physical specimen, is a really big guy. If you can't stay on the field, like I feel like his game should sort of resemble like Cam Newton, but like Cam Newton could take the beating. I'm just not sure he can, and so like if you're not super great at football and you can't stay on the field, you're kind of just a fantasy darling. Like we love when you're out there, you'll score 3 rushing touchdowns sometimes, but I can't see like a real life football team continuing to go through that for very long.
Yeah. There's the one other quarterback that we should probably talk about as like probably bigger favorite than the rest to end as a quarterback 1 overall on a given week. That's probably Bo Nix. We look at how this Broncos roster is set up. I mean, they have, depending on where you look, a top 3 offensive line. Some places have them as the top offensive line coming into the season, and they sure performed as it last year. Bo Nix entering year 2, he had 4 games where he put up 9 fantasy points or more on the ground.
I think he'll be back.
Yo. All right. I don't know what's going on with my internet. I'm gonna have to get this fixed. Change locations. Sorry about the interruption here. We were talking about weekly winners. I'll just jam until Papy comes back while we wait. The last person that I want to talk about at the quarterback position is Bo Nix. Yo, dude. Sorry about that.
You back? You good? I was
yeah.
just checking my phone to see where you were.
No, that's my fault, dude. I don't know what's going on with this internet. I obviously got to get this figured out. Not sure what's going on. I'm gonna take it up with AT&T. Dude, yeah. The last person I want to talk about, I'm not sure how much we got through this, but was Bo Nix. You look at how this Broncos lineup is set up. They have arguably the top overall offensive line heading into the new season. Depending on where you look, they're ranked in the top 3, pretty much anywhere you look. And Bo Nix entering year 2, they go out and they get Evan Ingram. They're set up well. He scored 9 fantasy points or more on the ground alone in 4 contests last year. So this is a guy who I will mix into my weekly winners as well as a potential like number 1 overall on a given week. Thoughts on that? Any other quarterbacks that you're really targeting in this format?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Broncos. I love their whole offense, really. If I can get their running backs right, one of these years, I've been drafting. I don't know, Broncos running backs.
Yeah,
just can't seem to. Hopefully, this will be the year, right? This will be the year that Harvey has a good year, or Dobbins, or one. I'm just gonna draft them all. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just one of them will be right. But yeah, no, I think Bo Nix is a good football player. I mean, I think he's an ascending player. I think he's got a good coach, good offensive scheme, good offensive line. Skill position players are hopefully going to be an improvement this year. I mean, I don't think they can really be much worse, other than Sutton. It was, I mean, I guess Mims is exciting sort of, but other than that,
he's ascending. I like Mims.
I mean, I don't know. He played. What did he play? Like, did he even play 30% of the snaps last year? I'm not sure he did, but he was exciting when he was out there. I think he's more of a gadget player though. So I think the offense will have better pieces around them. This year, I think it'll be a better offense. So I totally agree on Bo Nix. I'm bullish on the whole Broncos offense.
Yeah. Mims was over 47% in 3 of his final 5 games last year. But like, is this going to be another situation where they're like, we're going to run out Lil Jordan, Humphrey, Devon Bailey, Troy Franklin? Like, no, they went out and they drafted a guy. I think Mims is going to be ascending. I do like him. Yeah. Pat Bryant is, getting all the the beat writers are all over Pat Bryant. But yeah, I think Mims, like RJ Harvey, definitely I want Evan Ingram if I'm attacking Bo Nix. And there's a very specific reason why. If you look at like the hit rates of, if we just reverse engineer like all the people that have won like the Millie Maker, let's take the people that have won the Millie Maker over the last 3 seasons. There are 2 specific things that have a higher hit rate than the field's utilization. The first is including a tight end with your quarterback. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, they derive so much of their value from touchdowns. If they're scoring 1 or multiple touchdowns, they have a that much likelier chance of being the overall tight end 1 on a given week. And that's directly correlated to the quarterback scoring. The second is including a running back with your primary stack. And that makes sense too. Like, if a team is scoring 7 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. Then we've seen it at, sporadically over the last 3 seasons, going back to when Miami just blew up against the Ravens a couple years ago. If a team is scoring 6, 7 touchdowns, it becomes that much more likely that like multiple players are top 3 at their given position on a given week. And that increases your chances of winning on a given week. So I'm looking for chances to include a running back, as you kind of mentioned earlier. Like, you had Keaton Mitchell with a Lamar Jackson. I love that, man. If we see a running back injury ahead of him, Keaton Mitchell could be the guy on a given week. We just don't know with all the variants. So I want to look for spots to include the tight end. I want to look for spots to include a running back, because capturing that bulk scoring is so much more important, even than a standard best ball league in this format.
Yeah, I mean, I think also if you can do it with players who are going somewhat undrafted, like I don't think Keaton Mitchell's being drafted 100% of the time. I don't have the stats on where he's being drafted, but I'm sure there's some drafts where he's not being drafted. That's great in weekly winners. If you can find a guy at the end of the draft who you think could go undrafted who might have some big weeks, especially if he stacks. If you have somebody who stacks with him, swing away, because if that guy is going undrafted even for a month or two, maybe, even if good reports come out later and he starts getting drafted later, like you're getting such a big advantage in just people not having him. Because, it's not like DFS ownership is interesting, to think about, because in DFS, right, we're going to have certain people that are like the chalk and they're really high owned, and then people that are going to be under. So, but in ownership in weekly winners, which is really, it is a DFS tournament, really. Most of the field is going to be owned, sort of in a similar way. And the only place that you're really going to be able to get a big, like, okay, I have this guy and nobody else does, is at the end of a draft when, you're looking to like sort of swing away on a stacking partner or somebody who could have big upside. So at the end of drafts and weekly winners, it's another thing where like, forget safety. You know what I mean? Like just go for like the rookie who might get deep twice a year,
Yeah. And even guys like Zach Ertz, I'm talking about like stacking tight ends with your quarterbacks. So we're talking about the top quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels, obviously. Even guys like Zach Ertz, man, I want to have exposure to. If they're tied to a top overall quarterback, I want to have. Look at Zach Ertz last year. He's aging, and then he's like, okay, he's kind of like a go-to guy over the middle of the field. In week 16, he puts up a 6 for 72 and 2 line. If you have Jaden Daniels and Zach Ertz when that is happening, that much more likely to be in position to win a week. Lamar Jackson, we obviously have 2 tight ends to kind of choose from there. With Josh Allen, we kind of have 2 tight ends to choose from there. But I still, like, even though Dalton Kincaid scored 2 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons, I still want exposure to that stack. If it happens that Dalton Kincaid throws up a multi-score game, that's the correlation that we're looking for. Jalen Hurts, obviously, we have just 1 tight end that we're looking for there. And then Joe Burrow, same thing. Like, I'm still looking for the tight end, looking to stack that up. I want to have exposure to Mike Gesicki. Are you kind of approaching things the same way as far as quarterback tight end pairings go?
Yeah, I mean, I love quarterback tight end pairings in all forms of best ball. If I can, even in like BBM, if I can get like 2 or 3 quarterbacks paired with their tight ends, that's something that I want to do, especially on Underdog, because touchdowns are more important on Underdog. And there's just such a correlation between tight end, quarterback, touchdown, scoring. You know what I mean? Like if a tight end, if a tight end has a big game, he's probably scoring touchdowns. And, that means the quarterback has that much better of a chance of having a big game. So I'm trying to do that as much as possible. It's funny that you bring up Dalton Kincaid, because he's like a name that really hurts me to click.
Yeah.
I think he's just like not very good at football at all. But
I'm only clicking Kincaid if I have Josh Allen.
Yeah, I do it too. It's like if I have Josh, it just like hurts to do, because I'm just like, I get a lot of 2-point weeks ready. Get your 2-point weeks ready. Like I can't wait for all of them. But stacking is just too important, because as you said, if he has, especially in weekly winners, he could stink all year, but if he has that one game where he has 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, it's like, okay, well, that could be your week that you're winning. So I think that there's a huge edge overall in weekly winners. I think more than any of the other contests that I've seen, because I really don't think it makes sense to be taking like 4 quarterbacks. I just don't, or even 3. I would say 3 is like the most common thing that you see. Like 3 is the most common, and then 2 is probably next. Maybe 1 or 2 people a draft take 1 QB. I mean, I've had plenty of drafts where I'm the only one who takes 1 QB. So I don't know. I think, again, somebody's right and somebody's wrong. There's certainly not a consensus. So I think there's a huge edge in weekly winners, in my opinion. I guess maybe we'll see if I'm right or wrong. I also think for someone that's like drafting 150 teams, like for somebody who's drafting, doesn't have to do 150. If you're doing a lot of teams, even more so, like draft 1 quarterback and swing for the fences. I almost want to make sure I have a 1 quarterback team with all 32 teams stacked. I guess, every team stacked at least once, because you sort of think about it as like, well, if I just stack every team, right? Like one of them is going to be the team of the week, every week. And let's hope that team wins. So I think if you're doing a lot of teams too, like even more so, don't be afraid to swing away on the 1 QB teams.
Yeah, because it's really like Ricky Bobby. This contest is extremely like Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first, you're last. Like we are playing for first in a given week. And in order to do that, we need to be embracing the variance. And I think a lot of people are drafting this contest similar to the way that they would draft the BBM or some of the other season-long contests, and I think that's just a mistake. You mentioned one thing that kind of sparked my intrigue, and that's like we don't really know what optimal is. Like you said, you phrased it like somebody's right and somebody's wrong. This is entirely theory. Like we don't have the data to be able to say you're wrong and you're right. We know that there are probably more people drafting wrong than are drafting right. But theoretically speaking, I'm in the camp where one quarterback, you're playing for that quarterback to be the overall scorer because that increases your chances of winning on a given week that much more. And then that also gives you more shots on goal, more bullets in the chamber to be able to capture upside at the other positions. So like there are going to be, you mentioned rookies is one way, rookie wide receivers, like guys that are going undrafted. There probably is going to be a week where it's like somebody on some random team is going to put up like a 4 for 102 and 2 week. Like it's probably going to happen. Getting more shots on goal to access that kind of upside is what I'm looking to do here. Any other comments on this format before we shift over to the Eliminator?
No, I mean, I'm excited to see how it goes. I haven't really played it at all. So, I guess I have my opinions now. Maybe they'll change. But for right now, I think there's a big edge in just going, one quarterback build and stack as much as you can.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's shift gears now. Let's talk about the Eliminator. And if we look at how this contest is broken down now, you're in your pod with the people that you drafted with for week 1. Half of those players move on to the next week. From then on, it's mano a mano. You are heads up until we get to week 17, and then it's a 3-person pool for all the beans. So if I'm looking at this, a smaller player pool actually increases the variance of this contest if we compare it to last year, where last year you could have it would be much more likely if you put up like a 60th percentile outcome week that you were still advancing. Whereas now, theoretically speaking, you could put up a 99th percentile week and lose if it's heads up.
So I didn't play it last year. Give me a quick history lesson because this way is the only way I know. What was it exactly last year? The format?
Yeah, so last season you were in pods and they were randomly, they were kind of like sporadically dispersed throughout the season, but it was usually between 6-player pods and 14-player pods. And it was typically around like 50% advancement rate from that pod was the lowest it was. But like there were weeks where it was like 8 out of 12 or 8 out of 14. And then, so now it's like pure 50-50, but you're heads up every single week. So that actually increases the variance. So our how we're approaching this contest like has to change from last year to this year. I maxed it out last year, and looking like how I'm drafting this year is far different because we actually have more variance in this contest this year than we did last year. It's not the same as saying I'm playing the same person heads up for 17 weeks in a row, or I'm only doing head-to-heads in DFS for 17 weeks in a row, because we have this weird aspect of pod variance. Like we don't know who we're going to play. It's like if they took in DFS, if they took everybody that is playing head-to-heads and they randomly paired you up, like you would have to play slightly different than if you were picking the player that you're playing, because now we have things like exploitations that we can do. We have like, oh, I know this guy, he's typically going to allocate this amount of salary, this or whatever, or this guy I know is going to be like per projections. He's just going to run out like the optimal projected lineup. I know how I can attack that guy. With this pod luck thing, like we don't know. we have no idea. Is our opponent going to score a 100th percentile outcome? Is he going to score a 0 percentile outcome on a given week? Like we don't know. So like pod luck is actually greater in this format than it was last season. That's a very interesting aspect of this contest this year.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. I mean, cool the way they did it from a like entertaining perspective. It's just like 1v, you know what I mean? But from a, what is more fair sort of better way if you want to play a lot of lineups, like, yeah, I agree. Obviously, it's, you'd prefer to say like, okay, if I get a 75% outcome, like I'm probably going to be okay. Versus now, you could easily lose with a 75% outcome. I mean, as you said, you could lose with a 99th% outcome if you happen to run into somebody that's a little bit better. But really, where it's going to be annoying is when you have like a 75th or 80th, percent outcome, and you just lose to somebody who had, a 90th percent. So that's going to happen. And it's interesting because since it's going to be so like sort of random in that way, you may end up like late in the tournament with easy rounds. You know what I mean? You may just run into a team who has lucked their way through pod luck there,
or injuries, or all the things that can happen.
And so you're just not. I mean, you're winning a head-to-head every week. You could very theoretically have. We've all played like yearly fantasy football, old school yearly, 1990s fantasy football, right? And you would often see back in the day, for those old enough to do that, or those of us who still do that, like the best teams don't always have the best records. It's just, you would very often see like, a team that's in second place or something in a standard home league that is just not very good because they happen to run into all matchups where they got lucky. They just played low scoring matchups. So that happens all the time. Anyone who's played a yearly league will tell you that. So you're going to have, a lot like teams that are just that team in week 13 of the Eliminator League that just happen to, get lucky. So what's that mean to me? I guess a couple things from a strategy standpoint. Number one, I think bye weeks are very, very important in the Eliminator League. And I don't just mean bye weeks in terms of, obviously making sure that you don't have too many of any one week, which is, I think everybody knows, you want to try, if you take 3 QBs, 3 tight ends, and you want to try to, stagger your bye weeks as best you can. But I think late bye weeks are important in the Eliminator League for a couple reasons. Number one, if you get eliminated because you have bye week trouble in week 13 or 14, you made money on that team, right? So there's that aspect of it too. You make something. Where if you bye week trouble in week 5, like you're not really getting anything back. The other part of it too is that for bye weeks, maybe if you have your worst bye week is week 14 or whatever, maybe you just run into a team that week where they're just that team that's not very good, and you just get lucky that week. And getting lucky in week 14 is worth a lot more than getting lucky in week 6. So it's just like, if I can get to week 14 and then I have like bye week trouble week 14, I'm just like hoping, well, okay, getting lucky this week's worth a lot. So that's sort of how I look at bye weeks, I guess. But I do think that's important in the Eliminator League.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously we want to have as many staggered bye weeks when we're drafting this contest as possible. From like, if we take it all the way back to like game plan development, like how do we approach this contest in the most plus EV fashion? Last year, like the best way to approach the contest is like, I'm going to wait as long as possible and get as much information as I possibly can, and then draft as many rosters in this contest as I can right before the kickoff of the NFL season or before it filled. This year, though, that might not be the optimal way to approach things because we have this increased variance from like one-on-one pods. Have you put any thought into like when like we're drafting this contest and like the theory behind that, or like how are you approaching things just from like a macro perspective?
Yeah, man, that's a tough question that you just asked there, because I've put a little bit of thought into that. And I think there was in the Discord in 1 week season, people were sort of talking about that, should you wait to draft and only draft your Eliminator League teams later? I do think probably overall you should draft them later, I think is optimal overall. For me personally, I'm going to draft them sort of at the same pace that I'm drafting all my other teams, because I'm drafting a lot of teams and I sort of do 5 of them at a time in each thing. And I don't want to, just try to do all of my Eliminator leagues towards the end. Mm-hmm. The other part of it is that, like you said, there's more variance this year. So you may need we all talk about drafting early, like the super team, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In the Eliminator League, we think to ourselves like, oh, you don't need the super team, but you still might. You still might. And there's a chance you may have to win by putting up a 95th% or better outcome 3 or 4 weeks in a row. So, Yeah, I see both sides of that coin, and so I think that I've obviously done some early teams, and again I would say the example of my teams when I look back, the early ones where I really like is like George Pickens, who was getting drafted around like 75 or 80 before he went to Dallas, and now he's all the way up until like the top 50. I think he's like 46 or 7 or something like that. You can't get him like if you didn't draft in May, so there would be the example of like, all right, well, he could be like the super team or whatever. But obviously there's a lot more pitfalls too. You know what I mean? Like you're drafting guys like, Estimate, who is now totally worthless because they signed Dobbins. So there's, it goes both ways. But I do think I'm leaning towards like the later, like Eliminator League. There's probably an advantage to drafting later, but by the same token, it wouldn't shock me if when we look back at the end of this year at the winner, that the team came early from an early draft.
Yeah, so the way that I'm approaching how I'm approaching this contest, and I project to max it as well, 150 teams in this bad boy. I want to have exposure to these early drafts, but I'm going at a slightly slower pace. So, for example, I'm like 35 drafts through BBM. I think I'm like 15 through the Eliminator. One, they feel slower and it's harder to get. Two, like, I want exposure to this time frame where the variance is higher, because like variance is going to decrease as far as like drafting best ball as we get closer to the NFL season, because we have this weird equation of time versus information. Like each step of the way, we're going to continue to get more and more information on teams, on depth charts, on injuries, on beat reports out of like, how is this new offense going to look? Like, how are the Bears going to look? Well, we think that they're going to look a lot different than last year. They sunk a lot of free agent and money into their interior offensive line. That was a big issue for them last year. They bring in, obviously, a former guy who absolutely crushed in Detroit as head coach. We expect him to be calling offensive plays. So, like, there's a lot going on in a lot of these teams that we think we know, but we don't really know. We're going to get more information as the year progresses. And then all the stuff that we can't control too, like the weather and the injuries and the coaching tendencies. Like, who last year is a good example. Last year's Dolphins. Like, we all thought we knew the Dolphins going into the season, and then their offensive line is performing like trash, and Mike McDaniel has to like adjust things. And then Jonas Smith becomes this like mega tight end, has a career year. So like, there's just so much variance. And like, I don't know what the intent was of making the format change. I don't know what they were trying to do, but I do know, like, from a theory standpoint, it actually increases our variance. So I want to have exposure. All of that is a fancy way of saying, like, I want to have exposure to like this time frame of drafting where we know that variance is greater than we would have like right before the NFL season. And I'm drafting it differently like now than I am going to be come early September, late August. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. From a theory standpoint, like, yeah, it's still like a 50-50. Like, even if we just say like, I'm trying to win a coin flip 17 times in a row, like those odds are still pretty low. So it's still a contest where there's going to be variance associated with it, even though it's framed as this like, all you have to do is survive, dude, and move on and make it to 17 weeks, and then you make it to the finals. You only got to beat 2 other teams. Like, it looks great on the surface, but like, I think they are doing a disservice kind of how they framed it, how they structured it this year, because the variance is actually greater than it was last year. That's kind of my thoughts on it. Any other talking points on the Eliminator?
Yeah, I didn't do it last year. Obviously, I see the differences between the two. I think from an underdog, if you're underdog standpoint, it's probably better to do it this way, because you're really opening that like anything could happen. Like, how much of an advantage does somebody have as being like a sharper player if you're in this format? Like, it's such a high variance format that you could very easily see like 3 people who draft 5 teams or less in the finals. And I think Underdog wants that. So I get it from their perspective. I mean, it's going to be I'm a gambling man. Like I'll gamble. Like it's gonna be fun. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it's not gonna be a variance fest. It will, but like I'm in for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not going to deter me from drafting it. I'm still going to max this bad boy.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. It's like I don't know, man. Flipping a coin 17 times in a row and hoping to win all of those, very, very, very low chance. 0.5 times itself 17 times is a very small number, but you still. What I think they got right, we'll give some props, is we're getting paid like after week 4. So that's
I agree.
a plus.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's a plus. I think as a whole, Underdog has shifted to a little bit more kind of spread the wealth. And I think they had to do that as far as like ecosystem goes, keeping money on the site. I think that was good. And I think that they kind of did that across the board this year. So props to them for that. I will throw that out there. Dude, anything else to kind of cover? I'm so sorry about my internet coverage. It's been steady here in this new room. Maybe I just might have to make this.
You just had to move rooms. You just don't know the house yet. Yeah, we can finish with like a player take or two if you want. You know. You have anybody that you're high on this year?
The Bears, kind of as a whole, dude. Drafting the shit out of DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, kind of all of them, really. Also, I think my bold call for the Bears this season is that Roschon Johnson is kind of like a Dave Montgomery light in this offense. Just kind of look at like what they did over the offseason. They addressed pretty much all the positions they had to, and they left their running back room fairly the same. So Roschon Johnson, I think he's going to be like early down change of pace guy. I think he's going to be like a primary goal line type back. And we saw it a little bit last year with the previous scheme that like they brought him in at the goal line. That's just kind of what he's suited to do. He's a better running back or better suited at least than DeAndre Swift to like be a grinder between the tackles, has a larger frame, heavier guy. So yeah, I'm drafting the shit out of Roschon Johnson currently. I will be heavily overweight him.
I'll give you my top running back and receiver. And the guy I have the most of at running back is Jalen Wright, who he's gonna be that guy for me. It's like every year I feel like there's some running back in like the range of 150 to 200 where I have like 60% of them or something. And this year it's gonna be him. I'm not sure why he's as cheap as he is and as easy to get as he is. I mean, one injury away, or maybe even just being like a 35 or 40% snap player from possibly having value. He goes around pick like 165 to 175. So you're risking very little there. Don't understand why he's so much cheaper than a lot of other guys who are sort of just also the same thing, but actually even behind a better starter.
Yeah.
And then you're a Packers fan, right? Isn't that right?
I are.
Big, yeah. And then my highest end receiver is Matthew Golden. So I believe in Golden. I believe in that. I think the Packers got a really good player. He's super young, super fast.
Super fast.
Yeah, super fast. I really came on. In the second half of the season at Texas, and and again, I don't know if people realize how young he is. Very young player, like still definitely on his way up and getting better. And he looked like we know he's super fast, but he looked like he was a super fast guy who learned how to run routes in his second half of the year at Texas. Like that's why he started to take off, because it was like, okay, you're super fast, but like that'll only get you so far. You have to like learn how to run routes. Then he was like, okay, well now I'm like 20 and I learned how to run routes. And it was like, okay, now you're super fast and you can run routes and like you're good at football. So I think that he's gonna be. I mean, I've lost how much money I don't know on Christian Watson, like endless money. Like Christian Watson, finally, I don't have to draft Christian Watson anymore. Like I want that like downfield role so badly, drafting Christian Watson for forever, and it's finally there with Golden. And you don't have to spend that much on him. In my opinion, he's right out. I think he's between like 80 and 90 usually. So you don't have to spend that much on him, and I think he has the upside. Like if you were going to tell me who's the one guy who has the upside to finish like top 10 in his position that people wouldn't think, like I think it's Golden. So big fan of him. I think your Packers got a good one there.
Yeah, I agree. That'll be a fun offense with a healthy Jordan Love, hopefully. I like that shout. I'll throw you a wide receiver that is more in the middle rounds that I'm going to be extremely overweight on. That's Cedric Tillman. I love in early drafts taking both Cedric Tillman and Deontay Johnson, which is like you're talking about like a 8th, 9th round pick and then a undrafted. Those guys are highly likely to be on the field near every down, at least for passing plays. Where early reports are Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman are going to be starting Z and X. That leaves Deontay Johnson the starting slot role. And yeah, Jeudy will probably see some slot snaps. He's going to get moved around the formation. But those two guys in particular, like being able to, I just did a written thing on stat cuffs. I think it's probably going to get posted today over on OWS, but that's like one of my top stat cuffs for the ADP that you have to sink into them. Just take both, dude.
Yeah, I love Tillman. In fact, I said Golden's my highest owned receiver. Tillman is my second highest owned.
There we go. Nailed it.
Love Tillman. I've been drafting Tillman the whole draft season. And really for me, it's just about the role. Like, and I think they just recently said he's gonna be the wide receiver 2 with Jeudy. But I never really thought it was gonna be anybody else. And so when you look at where he's being drafted, like there's just not a lot of guys. I would even put another guy I have a lot of is Michael Wilson for the Cardinals, and same thing. Like he's the wide receiver 2 as far as I can tell. And so if you let me draft a wide receiver 2, around pick like 180, then like I'll do it, because there's not a lot of other guys who are even going to be on the field that much, let alone be the actual wide receiver 2. So, I think Tillman's a great pick. Love Tillman.
Yeah, dude. And earlier, let me clean up something. I said 8th or 9th round. I looked at the wrong number when I looked at it. I was looking at projection, not ADP. Dude, he's got an ADP in the 13th round. So
I have so many drafts. I would just say like the pick numbers. I don't even think in rounds anymore. I just think pick numbers. But I was gonna say I thought he was a little bit lower than that.
Yeah,
so it's bit. Like you can get him for almost nothing really. And I don't. Same thing. Him and Michael Wilson are the two guys that I look at, and I'm just like, their role as a wide receiver 2 doesn't match where they're being drafted. So I'll have them.
Let's end it with a first rounder that you're going to be underweight on.
Oh, first rounder that I'm going to be underweight on, man. It hurts me to say this, but probably Gibbs will be the guy, and it would be Gibbs, or like I could have said Barkley, in the fourth. Oh, he had 400 touches, and everybody's saying that now. I kind of hope Barkley just has a huge year, and like I'm going to draft a bunch of Barkley, because everybody seems to think like they're smart enough to know Barkley's not any good. Like we'll see, but Gibbs, like Gibbs is the guy to me who if Montgomery is healthy, he's just in the way. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's being drafted in the top 5, and he's kind of in a timeshare. I mean, when you say it that way, it just sounds like why would we ever be drafting a guy who's in the top 5 in that timeshare? Now I know obviously, if Montgomery goes down, Gibbs is like, would be the number 1 overall pick. So I can understand that, but like you're still taking him at number 5. So like even if Montgomery goes down and like Gibbs would be the number 1 overall pick, like how much did you necessarily even gain? And if Montgomery doesn't go down, I think Gibbs is just not he's really like a back end of the first round, or like second round, or even like if you look at his numbers, he wasn't putting up the like, oh my God, eye-popping winning you league numbers until Monty went down. So I think Gibbs is a lot more riskier than top 5. If Monty stays healthy, I think he has, risk at that price.
I disagree respectfully. But that's why we're here, man. My guy in the first round that I will be severely underweight is Ashton Jeanty. I don't understand what we're doing here. The Raiders are projected, they're tied for 31st in projected points scored this season. And we have so much uncertainty. We have so much change. This is also a team where they have 2 players that are currently being drafted in the top 18 picks, and they are 31st in projected points scored this year. I will be severely underweight Ashton Jeanty.
It's funny. I feel the same. I'm going to be severely underweight Bowers, and it's kind of the same thing of like, I just don't see that offense supporting a tight end at where he's being drafted. Genty, I agree. I'm not like super pumped about Genty either for the same reasons. I just think with Genty, he could like lead the league in touches. Like I could see an outcome where he leads the league in touches. And if he does, it's hard to fail. But yeah, I agree. When you look at what the Raiders offense is projected to score, and then you look at, they have 2 fantasy players going in like the top 20 picks, it's a little bit head scratching there.
Yeah. I mean, dude, GT's 5'8", 211. Can he handle 350 plus? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I don't
he's
see.
He's built like a fire plug though, man. Like
He is.
I mean, he's like a human bowling ball out there. I think he can handle it personally. I mean, I don't know the guy personally, but I just seen him on TV and he looks pretty hardy. He looks pretty stout.
Yeah. We're not quite at Saquads, but I mean, he's got some quads for sure.
Yeah,
dude,
a bear. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on again. Apologies to the fam. Apologies to you for the internet issues. Looks like we're doing better here. I will get this worked out definitely before the start of the season. Try and get it worked out for next episode. But appreciate you coming on again, dude. I think we'll probably try it and have you come on again one more time this off season. We always have good discussions, and it's good for the OWS fam to see your face instead of just your words. But yeah, thanks for coming on, dude. If you're new to 1 week season, we have 2 different offerings for best ball offerings this year. The entry level best ball package, smaller price, you get access to everything that's on the scroll. And the best ball plus, we have higher level training sessions that are behind the paywall that go to the podcast only that you'll get access to as well. So head on over to 1 week season, check out best ball or best ball plus. And until next time, you all, we will see you in the draft lobbies. Cannot wait to see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 week season.